KATU presents Kind is Better, a youth mental health town hall. Thank you for joining us. I'm Deborah Knapp.
And I'm Steve Dunn. We first launched our Kind is Better initiative in November, and we've been listening ever since as part of our KATU's Your Voice, Your Future project.
Our studio is filled with young people ready to share their struggles, their triumphs, and their efforts to improve the mental health of either themselves or others.
And here's why this conversation is so incredibly important. We bleed. We bruise, our bones break, our tendons tear, but we know what to do. We ice, we elevate, we stay off a sprain, allow it to heal. But how do you treat an injury, an ailment you can't see, when ice and elevation don't apply?
If mental health was prioritized the same as physical health, that there'd be less stigma.
KATU News has spent the last year talking to kids about suicide and youth mental health.
Constantly depressed, constantly suicidal. The worst time of my life was freshman year. It completely takes control of you.
I was feeling, I think numb is a good way to describe it.
I didn't feel like I had any options. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone, and I tried to kill myself.
I just didn't know how to cope with it.
You know it's prevalent. You know it needs to be addressed.
This is reality. And if it's our reality, it's got to be somebody else's reality.
We've identified the problem that a quarter of 8th graders told the Oregon Health Authority their emotional and mental health is either fair or poor. The number was even higher for high school juniors at 33.8%.
Kids deal with a lot different things than we do.
So we launched Kind is Better, a project to tell stories of survival, to offer hope, to invite others in to help Oregon's youth, even taking advice from a Kind is Better Youth Advisory Council. And mental health experts in our community are seeing a shift.
We're definitely noticing attitudes changing about talking about mental health.
Famous people are going public with their mental health challenges, and our kids seem more comfortable to talk about mental health than previous generations.
I've been struggling with mental illness for my entire teenage life.
We want this town hall to be a platform for the many young people in the audience tonight, so they can open up and tell us what they need. But talking about it is just the first step. In this Kind is Better Youth Mental Health Town Hall, we explore how kids can prepare for life's obstacles, how to treat emotional bleeds before it's too late.
Yeah, I'm definitely stronger.
Not perfect. It's going to be a journey.
By teaching resilience.
I feel pretty good.
By making connections.
I look around my classroom and everybody's always in their phones.
And the roles, both good and bad, social media plays in our kids' lives. And while our focus tonight is kids and teens, we do have a panel of experts, and it's a great panel. Gallie Murray, Suicide Prevention Coordinator for Clackamas County Health, Housing, and Human Services. Dr. Elise Conterno, a clinical psychologist specializing in the treatment of anxiety disorders. Dr. Robin Henderson is also here, Chief Executive Behavioral Health with Providence Health Services. And Dr. Ajit Jetmalani, Head of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at OHSU Dornbecker Children's Hospital. Some topics we cover will certainly be heavy, and that's why we have helpline numbers scrolling right at the bottom of your screen tonight. Now let's focus on the reason we're here, and that is the teens. Deb?
Well, Steve, you will hear from the young people who are behind me and across from me in an effort to get a better understanding of the challenges they face. So if you are watching at home and you'd like your voice to be heard in this town hall, send us your comment or your question to either our Facebook page or Twitter account. So we want to get the conversation going by starting with Haley Hardcastle, who is a senior. You're graduating this week. Go ahead and stand up, Haley. What do you hope that people will learn from home from watching this town hall?
Yeah, I hope that people from home learn that it's so incredibly important to involve youth in conversations like this. The power of how we know to help our peers is so important, and I just hope that adults can kind of model what the students here have been doing since we have so many amazing people in this room.
Thank you so much for your input. Okay, Annie, do you mind standing up for me? What kind of impact do you hope the audience gets from listening to teens and mental health and the importance of it?
I think it's really important for parents to understand that the voices of their kids should be heard, and that the way that they're feeling is real. Because I think a lot of the time that adults will say like you're overreacting or you're just stressed or those kind of things, and it's really important for kids to feel like their voices are heard, especially when they're in that vulnerable place where they feel alone. Like no one should ever feel like their parents aren't listening to them when they're feeling that way, and no one should ever feel alone in their struggles with mental health. And I think that I would hope that parents watching and those kids watching are able to know that it's okay to talk about mental health, and that it is, just because it's a serious problem doesn't mean that it's something that's inappropriate to talk to your kids about.
As you can hear, Haley and Annie have some important things to say, and the impact is going to be felt greatly here. And Steve, we spent a lot of time off-site listening to teens.
We absolutely did, Deb, as a matter of fact, and the person I'm standing next to played a very big role in that. Michelle Markiston is our KATU Kind is Better ambassador, and we actually do have ambassadors. That's how big this issue has become. Tell the audience how you helped do something special for this particular town hall, Michelle.
Sure. Well, you got introduced to the Kind is Better Youth Advisory Board, and you heard the main buckets of conversation that they were talking about. So we went out to communities in Vancouver, Hillsborough, and Portland, and truth kind of, are these the biggest issues affecting youth mental health? The connections, the stress and anxiety, and then also the role social media plays. So we'll be hearing from them today, too.
We absolutely will. You made a lot of connections, too. In fact, one of the most talked about topics in those group discussions was anxiety. Students had a lot to say about that. Watch this.
I feel like there's a lot of people that are older than me that are like, oh, everyone has anxiety these days, and like everybody is having mental health issues. And I'm like, well, no, people are actually talking about it. Nobody was talking about it before.
In our transition from becoming kids to an adults, like this is like where we change the most, and sometimes like we're getting, like he said, jobs and work, school, and we also have home issues, and so it's kind of hard to navigate everything at this kind of young age, and everything is changing.
So much more stress is put on students now than when our parents were in school, and it's so much more like you need to go to college, you need to get your life together, and there's so much more expectations put on students now, and I think that's a big factor in mental health, because all the expectations that we have on us that we need to do good, and then in school as well, it's just sometimes it gets overwhelming and we don't know how to express it, and it comes out in ways of like panic attacks and things.
I also think social media has a big part on that, just because it's so influential to us, because like we're on it 24/7. I mean, all you hear in classrooms is put your phone away. So I think that's also a big part in just like seeing what like the perfect like person is on social media, if that makes any sense, and then like we're just constantly comparing it to ourselves.
We're really having the youth lead this conversation with us today. So I want to start with what's resonating with a lot of you right now when you hear this, what people are saying about anxiety. Derek, I want you to stand up and let us know what resonates with you when you hear those kids talk.
I really think that the most important thing to take away from what the students are saying is that we don't really know how to express our feelings in healthy ways all the time, and that comes out as kind of a bad thing for parents, for teachers, for their peers, because when students lash out, they normally get punished for it in one way or another, and that just adds to the anxiety, to the stress they're already feeling. And I really feel like if they just had effective ways of expressing their feelings, especially with school, with college debt, stuff like that, parents, teachers, and students would all better themselves from that.
I felt like we heard a lot of it's more stressful now, and like you're saying, there's not a place or an outlet for us to talk about it or things like that. Anything else stick out to any of you guys when you're watching that about the anxiety? Is it more stressful now being a teenager? What kind of stresses are you facing? Yes. Go ahead and stand up and tell us your name.
So my name is Finn Jacobson. I'm with Oregon Youth Line. Yeah, I think that I would definitely agree that it's a lot more stressful for our generation. It comes down to stuff as simple as our schoolwork, homework, finals, and then it also comes to this added factor of the fact that many of us were born with smartphones in our hands. Mm-hmm. There definitely is that certain role that social media plays, and I would also add that while it's becoming less of an issue, there is still that factor of a lot of people don't believe that mental health issues exist within teens and with young people. And that also has a separate effect on us. And not only are we worried that we're feeling this way, but we're worried that people are going to ostracize us for it.
You opened up quite the door on the digital age. Anybody else want to talk about the social media aspect and how it's affecting your anxiety levels or how you're living day to day, whether it's in school or at home? Okay, go ahead and stand up and let us know who you are.
Hi, my name's Matt Brown. With social media introduced, we see like our age now is this new, modern, energized age with a lot of new technology. And because of that, it sets a boundary between us and those that came before us and our parents, us and our teachers, because they think we have, the easy way out. We have it easier now that we have all this technology. And that barrier between us creates a whole, it opens up a door of misunderstandings. Because we feel that because our life now is so different from then, our problems were not the same as our parents. Our parents believe that our problems aren't as bad as the ones that they faced. And so because of these misunderstandings, we get these barriers and we can't talk about real issues because we feel like those that came before us aren't going to really understand the gravity of the issues that we're facing today.
Thank you so much. There is certainly a difference between the generations, and I want to turn it over now to Genevieve Rayon.
And I want to actually turn it right over to Hannah, who's someone that I've met with a few months prior. She's a storyteller with ASHA, and so she shares her stories with schools, talks about her own anxiety battle. Hannah, can you tell us a little bit about your battle and how you were able to get help so quickly?
Do you want me to stand up?
Stand
Okay.
up and I can hold on to this.
Okay, so I'm Hannah. I'm a junior at Glencoe, and I've really struggled with anxiety pretty much my whole life. But I got a name for it and a label for it a couple years ago when I entered into counseling and therapy. And I'm really a success story with the mental health system. I was able to talk to my parents. I was able to get help from the school and then actually get put in touch with a counselor very quickly. And I am pretty much the only person I know whom the system has worked for. I had the perfect combination of a supportive parents and friends who encouraged me to get help a healthy way and everything else. But almost everyone I know struggles with their mental health in some way or another. And like I said, I'm pretty much the only person who's been able to go through the system the right way. And I think that communication breakdown is the biggest issue facing us in this fight against mental illness.
What do you think is broken about the system? What needs to change?
I think, like I said, a communication breakdown. So we are struggling with a lot of things, and a lot of times parents tend to say, oh, you're just kids, we struggled with it, back in my day. And the fact of the matter is, it is a lot harder to be a teenager now because we're just overloaded with information all the time. So we really are struggling, and a lot of us have a really hard time getting taken seriously. So there's a communication breakdown between us and our parents, who are supposed to be our greatest advocates. But then there's also a breakdown in the system where a lot of us turn to getting help from school, and the schools are underfunded and there's not enough counselors, and some schools don't even have mental health counselors, like my school didn't used to. And so not only are we struggling and not having our struggles taken seriously, but then even if we get over that hurdle, then we can't get access to professional help, whether that's medication or counseling or whatever it is.
Thank you, Hannah. I think it's a perfect opportunity to toss it back over to Steve with the panelists of mental health experts here. I mean, in response to that, what do we need to do? How can we help?
And that's the big question, because I know a lot of you were nodding your heads as you're listening to these young kids talk. And we talk about anxiety, and they say, boy, things are different today. And young people have always had anxiety. What's different now? I want to start with Elise Quintero, Northwest Anxiety Institute. What are you seeing out there now that's so much different now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I get that question a lot from people, and the answer is I don't know. I don't think we really know exactly what is different, but it feels really different, and we are hearing that now from everyone. One of the theories that we think about and talk about is the expectations. People were talking about that, the expectations placed on teens, that there's one path forward, and anytime we veer from that path, there's a problem. Another expectation is that you're happy. Just be happy, and when you're not happy, then something is wrong. And that kind of creates a precedent that our negative feelings, our difficult emotions are not to be touched, not to be talked about. And so I appreciate this forum to be able to bring that up, that yeah, stuff is hard, and it is harder. We're hearing that from everyone, and it's okay to talk about it, and it doesn't mean something is wrong, it just means we can get through it.
Well, one of the big topics keeps coming up, and in fact last year we did this, social media for a lot of these kids, and you see them shaking their heads now. Dr. Robin Henderson, how big of a role is that playing? And is that the big difference now when I was a kid?
I think that's part of it, but I also think that
social media is going to be around. We can't stop it. We can't say, oh, gee, all of a sudden we're going to put you in this little perfect bubble in a box and you're not going to have it. It's a reality, so we need to learn how to deal with it. And we need to help teach our kids and give them tools. And some of the most effective things that I've seen these days are teaching kids how to combat bullying, how to combat those types of feelings online. When you see somebody being bullied online, you flood the zone with positivity. You use social media as a tool for good as opposed to a tool for bad. And when we see programs that educate kids and empower them, that takes the anxiety away. Because if they know how to battle those types of things, then they have the agency and the ability to take control of the situation, which reduces the anxiety.
So how do we teach them to do that?
There are some really great programs out there. I work very closely with a large group of educators with a program called #ICanHelp. And #ICanHelp is a national program, works with Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, and many of the other major platforms that kids are on. They're not on Facebook, let's be honest. They're on Snapchat, right? Right. And being able, and I think some of our youth could talk about some of the real life examples we've seen. When you tag #ICanHelp and how that actually goes in, tags and notifies the platform you're on that somebody's being bullied, and also then helps to elevate and give positive props to the students that are doing that. That's just one example, but the biggest thing starts with talking about it. Just talking about it. We've had this thing where we've said, no, social media is bad, and if we just had social media go away, everything would be fine. And what I've learned this last year working with the Be Well Student Advisory Council and the educators that I've worked with here in Oregon is that social media is a fact of life. I did Derek and I did a podcast together on Talk to Be Well, and we talked about school anxiety, and he was telling about this phenomena where in school you're told, no social media, no phones, et cetera, but every student is connected to their teacher in their classes. So every one of these classes has an app or some type of thing that pings them all day long. You've got this homework assignment, don't forget about this test, don't forget about this, and it happens constantly. So imagine you're a high-performing student, you want to get good grades, you've got 3 or 4 AP classes, you're getting pinged constantly by every teacher you have. And how that builds up creates anxiety. There's no relief. So the thing that we tell students to stay away from, we also in turn use to engage.
Yep. Well, the importance of talking about that is why we are here tonight. And you got some more kids over there, Deb. Go ahead.
I do. I'm going to walk around here and get people's perspective on this. And it's so interesting because social media is not going away. We just have to learn how to use it to our advantage, I guess. Go ahead and tell us your name.
My name's Aaliyah Sponsler. I just think, like she was saying, the expectation on students is a lot higher now because, like, if you want to get a good job, you have to go to high school, you have to go to college, It's always a constant need to try to get a higher education, and that's why it's a lot more stressful because before people weren't thinking about college and higher education as much as they are now. And things with the climate change and stuff, they always say, oh, you guys are our future, you guys need to change it. And so it puts a really high expectation on us because they always want us to change it, but adults are still here, they're still here, you guys can help us as much as we can help our future, And I just think social media is also a really big piece about the difference between back then and now. But also it's about people talking about it because I know 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they weren't talking about it at all. And so now they have a lot more people talking about mental health and how to help it and change it. And so that's probably a big difference.
So it's interesting that you said the adults are still here. They can kind of help us out. Are we passing the buck? Are we creating more pressure for you?
I feel like adults now are kind of like, oh, well, I did as much as I can. And so here, it's your guys' problem now. Like, we're not going to be here in 50 years, so you guys are, so you guys can do it all.
Thank you so much. Genevieve?
I'm here with Gracie. She's also a student. She wanted to talk about how often through social media people are able to hide behind a screen. That is obviously can be a scary place for people on the other side who are receiving those messages or who are just interpreting them in maybe a confusing way. Can you talk about that idea about hiding behind a screen, what that means?
A lot of times people will go to social media and throw trash and throw angry words, but they don't have the courage or they don't feel safe when they do it in front of people because they know they'll get in trouble. But if they're hidden behind a screen, then they can be all anonymous, which leads to bullying, even more, worse, cyberbullying. It can also lead to suicidal, and it can also lead to depression. A lot of times, people don't understand that a screen is just a barrier that keeps the one that wants to stay protected unknown, which leads them to having the power and leaving the victim weakness.
How many people in your school would you say are negatively impacted by social media?
More than half.
And do you think a lot of these students think there is a positive to social media? What is the positive to it?
I guess the only positive I see in social media is like staying in touch, or like showing inspiring things, like saying inspiring quotes or telling people like keep your head up, you got this and all that. But then there's the other side where there's people like saying like, oh, you don't deserve this or that, or you're worthless and all that. So
Can be a lot
Yes.
to handle. Thank you, Gracie. I want to throw it back to Steve and the mental health experts here. I mean, how do kids deal with that? How do they know how to respond to these kind of situations?
Well, we were talking about this, Dr. Jet Milani, a little bit earlier, and you listen to these folks in the audience, and they're very insightful. There's no question about that. But you talked about internal and external. Go ahead, tell me about that.
Well, I did want to mention one thing that has come to my attention working at Dornbecker Hospital is that there are frequent occurrences. Probably every week we have a young person who's tried to hurt themselves after having their phone taken away. There were conflicts and challenges in the house around phone usage, and the phone was grabbed and the young person has tried to hurt themselves. So I wanted to get that out on the table as something that families to think about, other strategies when you're struggling around the use of social media.
So you're emphasizing don't take the phone away from the kids?
I'm saying not to do it abruptly. I think it needs to be a conversation, a problem-solving strategy between the youth and the adult on how we're going to get there. That's difficult to do oftentimes. But one of the things is, of course, these companies are not building friendly devices to help all of us live our lives better necessarily. They're building addictive devices to sell products. And we have to remember that when we use those services. That's the purpose of those services. And we are tending to be addicted to the notion of being triggered for measures of how we're doing based on outside things, like how do we look, how do we compare to others. Trying to compare ourselves to the myriad of things that we see online is a devastating process because you'll never be good enough to compare to everything that you see. We have to learn how to focus more on our own self-worth as opposed to what we see online and measure ourselves against that. If we're addictively going back and checking, what we're doing is reinforcing the sense that, oh gosh, we really haven't got what I thought I had. I got to keep trying harder until I'm really better than everybody else online in terms of how I look, the words that I have. And that's really a direction that has no winning end to it.
This is such good information for all of us, parents and kids alike. Deb, some more kids talking over there. Go ahead.
Well, I want to say that comparison factor, that's a big element, and it starts young as well because you're talking gaming and social media. I want to turn back to Haley when we're talking about the anxiety levels.
Yeah, in addition to the cyberbullying issue, I'd just like to reiterate the importance of comparing yourself to people online. And I think that the most important thing that parents can do to help us with this, and some success stories that I've seen, is making sure that your children know that their lives are bigger than just online. Because while you can't take away social media, since it's the way that we connect and make friends and things like that, it's so important to encourage children to join clubs and activities and get out of the house and get off their phones. It'll just create a negative impact if you take their phone away. But if you encourage them to do things other than that, it'll have a great impact, as well as reminding them that people aren't posting their failures online, because a lot of these comparisons aren't only coming from companies and ads that we see, but also, our friends and our family that we love and trust, and we want to be just like them, but people aren't posting the bad things online. So I think it's important that students know that.
Right. Good point, Haley. Thank you so much. Young people are dealing with so much with their mental needs, and are they being addressed? Lives depend on it. And during our sessions, we really look to see what the barriers are and how we can help.
I personally don't know a single health counselor at our school. I don't know their names. I don't know where they have their office or anything like that. And so for me, if I were to want to seek that help at school, I wouldn't know where to start because that's not something that's made known to everyone. And I think that's probably one of the first problems that that students have is they just don't have the resources not available to them, but made known to them.
I personally have really bad anxiety, and I'm just now getting help, and I've had it ever since I was a child. But when I was little, my parents just always told me, you know, you're just making a big deal about it. You're not, like, there's nothing actually there. You're just making a bigger deal than you need to be because you're shy or whatever, and it wasn't actually addressed. And so now I'm 18 years old and just finally getting the help and support. And it's just been really difficult all of these years trying to do all these assignments, and like oral presentations are all things that I really struggle with. And it would have been nicer to get the help sooner.
I think it's way easier than it was, but there's a stigma surrounding it that if you try and reach out for help, you're kind of looked at as like, oh, this person needs help, you know, let's judge them, I guess. I mean, I think maybe that's probably not true at all, but I feel like a lot of people think that way, and then they don't reach out for help because they believe that they can get through it themselves when it's okay to ask for help.
I don't really want to talk to my parents about it and everything because I don't want my parents to think that something's wrong with me. I don't want to disappoint my parents, like, because I look up to them and I want them to be like, oh yeah, I'm so proud of my little girl. I want to impress them and just like, oh yeah, just shake it off. It's all right, you can get through it and everything, but I do need that support system.
A lot of points hit in that storyline that we just saw here. I want to start with how heavy is the stigma of mental health? And does that prevent you guys from talking about it, whether it's to your teachers or your parents? How heavy is that stigma? Go ahead. Tell us who you are, please.
I'm Kelly Park, and I definitely agree. There's a really huge stigma around mental health. And I think a skill that oftentimes gets overlooked is just being a good listener. I think we forget how important it is to just, when someone does open up to you about their story, they're coming from a really vulnerable place. And sometimes I think our first instinct is to just offer some advice, or maybe say, maybe you should change this, or maybe you're doing this wrong. But sometimes it's just important to let them know that you're there for them and just be there to listen and be a good support system. And I think someone else touched on this earlier, but that kind of leads back to the fact that schools definitely need more counselors. And while there are really amazing resources like Youthline, I think that having more counselors in schools could definitely help the problem.
The availability to having someone to listen to us, right? Genevieve, let's go over to you now.
One thing that I've heard repeatedly in this project is that in order to make change, we do need money to do that, and there is a lack of funding here in Oregon and in Washington to make that possible. But I want to ask Sandy Mathewson to comment on this here. She's with Battleground School District. You guys actually just got a grant a few years ago that allowed you to really make some positive changes in your community.
Yeah. Hi. Yes, we were the recipient of a grant that was given to our state. $10.2 million came into the state of Washington. Battleground received about $500,000 a year for the past 4 years. The primary goal of that grant was to increase mental health services to our students and their families and to increase awareness of mental health. Last year, for instance, 580 students in our district were referred to mental health services. We have a mental health therapist, master's level therapist from our community provider. We work closely with our Educational Service District 112 to bring those services in. The community providers are able to bill, which is really important. And of those 580 students who received the service, 270 of them are in those services daily. By having it in school, we reduce the barriers of transportation, and we always try to involve parents, although in the state of Washington at 13 or older, you can seek and receive your own services as well. So we have the opportunity for youth to come in and receive the services. Over 95% of our kids said it was helpful to them. 70% said they're doing better in school, getting better grades, and anxiety plummeted with the students who were involved in the project. So it's possible to do it. We had the funding to start it. We are sustaining those services, meaning that the grant ends this year, but our community provider is staying, and the safety net that was built with the funding did its purpose. And now we have a program that we're hoping to drive out and replicate, actually. So it's a very good success story with a lot of great community partners, which we could not have done without it. But thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. I appreciate that. I mean, that's just a point in case there that how important money is. But Steve, it's not easy to get money. We've seen that.
It is not. And another thing important that a couple of the kids touched on was just talking about it, how important that is to them, getting the discussion out there. Gallie Murray, let's talk about that a little bit, because talking about mental health the same way we do physical health is key, right?
Absolutely.
I think that, you know, if we moved our society towards talking about mental health just like we do talk about physical health, we would be in a very, very different place with rates of suicide, with rates of health in general. I think about, you know, if any of us here tonight were to walk out to our cars or out on the sidewalk to get the bus or whatever, and you happened to across someone who had their hand over their chest as if they were potentially having a heart attack of some kind or a medical emergency, my guess is that every single person in the studio tonight would stop and say to that person, hey, are you all right? You call 911. None of us in this room would walk away. None of us in this room would assume the person behind me will take care of that person who looks like they're having a heart attack. None of us would think, well, I'm not gonna ask you if you're okay because I don't wanna offend you or get in your business. And that's how we treat people who have physical health emergencies. We ask them if they're okay. We don't think about invading your privacy. But for people who are emotionally distressed or suffering, we pretend like we don't see them. We pretend like someone else will be responsible for dealing with them. We're afraid about invading their privacy. And you know, I'm not saying that people need to go out and become mental health professionals. What I am saying is that if we acknowledged each other as human beings in the world, and I've heard a lot tonight in the studio about the importance of connection. No one's really calling it connection, but you know, chatting with other people, seeing each other. But if we actually acknowledged each other in the world as I see you as sharing space in the world with me as another human being, we would be in a very different place. And the simple question of like, are you okay, goes very, very far. So talking about mental health is, if we, you know, events like this and people sharing their personal stories of suffering from anxiety or depression or what have you, normalizes the conversation around mental health. 1 in 4 of us either will or already does experience a mental health issue in our lifetime, 1 in 4 of us. And that's a very, very common statistic, and actually more common than a lot of physical health issues, but yet we don't talk about it. We don't talk about our mental health like we do physical health.
I think it's important to get the word out. As a society, we need to do a better job of talking about it and letting people talk about it as well. Let's go back to Deb Knapp. Go ahead, Deb.
I love the fact that these kids are engaging in this conversation with us, and that connection is so valuable. Let's start with you.
Hi, my name is Maddie Clevenger from the Kind is Better campaign. I totally agree that when you see someone with like physical pain, you want to help them out. So like, you see someone with a broken foot, you don't want them to go around walking on it. It feels kind of the same way with mental health. You don't want them to feel that pain, but it doesn't always present itself the way a broken foot would. And so you have to treat it as something as serious, as something as physical health. And I feel like when people talk about like their experiences with mental health, you want to give advice to them and be like, it's okay, look on the bright side. But what they want is they want to know that they're not alone, and that you empathize with them, and that you know that it sucks and you feel bad, and you know that there's not much you can do except listen, because that's all that they really want. That's just how I feel.
So you're talking a lot about that connection again, that listening component. Go ahead and tell us what you wanted to add to the conversation.
Yes, so my name is Megan Kendall. I'm also a part of the student Kindness is Better Student Advisory Board. And one thing that I think is really important to discuss is what is happening on social media, because we can kind of say whatever we want on social media. We are being affected by that every day, and I think something that needs to be addressed is that we have the power to stand up to those people that are saying those things. And I think that through social media, you are able to report that and discuss that. And because we aren't doing that as much, people are being affected by it. But if we take that change and are able to, stand up for others and see how they're doing, even though we have those barriers, we can make a huge difference.
Thank you so much. Flooding with kindness, I think that's what you said earlier. We can change the tone of what's being said on social media. Steve?
Certainly key. Dr. Jet Milani, you were listening to these students. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I feel like they should be up here and I should be in the audience.
We can switch that around.
Yeah. I think that one of the keys to solving the problem of how do we deal with social media is it has to be a dialogue between youth and adults, young adults, and educators, parents, really have to come to a collective understanding of what to do together, rather than it being done to somebody or by somebody else to somebody else. It has to be a joint effort. And I do think that the adolescent, the young adult, is very motivated by connection to their peers, and they're much more likely to become emotionally activated by big emotions that happen through others. Neurologically, it's not different than childhood, it's different than adulthood. Adolescent brains are working very differently, and we have to protect them differently and use them differently. You have a lot of power as an adolescent because of how your brains work, and you have vulnerabilities. And the more you learn about that, the better we can do with how social media affects us.
Very good point. A lot of folks out there watching on Facebook right now and social media. Our Lincoln Graves is standing by, listening to some of those folks. What do they have to say, Lincoln?
Yeah, we talk about social media. We hear about some of the negative aspects of it. But of course, we're mining for comments on social media, asking people for their various questions and comments on those social media platforms. We want to let you know about one comment from Stephanie Tamman Jensen. She says, "You teens are brave. Thank you for being you." That's just one comment out there. And we also want to pass along this question from Rhea Norquist. Does anyone know if they have peer support groups in the schools now that they can attend during school hours? Now, I know our Battleground representative touched on this a little bit, but I've heard some other from some other people saying, do these happen throughout all of those age groups? So we want to get that response from you as well, Steve.
We'll definitely work on that. Can you guys, as you listen to some of these questions coming in, can you address any of this? Go ahead, Galli.
So I can speak to a little bit of what's happening in Clackamas County. So there's an amazing organization called Youth Era, which is not Clackamas County specific. I think some of you in studio have probably heard about Youth Era or probably affiliated with Youth Era. Amazing peer support organization that has multiple locations. We are fortunate to have one of them in Clackamas County. And we have started just this past year, there's a high school in Clackamas County that actually has what we're referring to as a pop-up drop center. And it is a once a week in a high school where Youth Era staff are actually going in with peer supports into, I believe it's a half an hour or 40-minute time every week. It's a set schedule, it's a set place, and the goal of that is to foster connection and have a place where youth can come and peer supports are in place. It's not specifically stated, but teachers and administrators are not allowed. So it's a great place.
Are you confident, Galli, and maybe others on the set here as well, that as word gets out there, we have more programs like this and we hear from more kids like this, that there will be more services in the very near future? What do you think?
I think that, and the way that I think about this is that the work of, as a suicide prevention coordinator and somebody who talks about mental health and the need to talk about mental health, being more aware, is that we have been raised up personally and professionally in our world, some of us older than others of us in this room, but we've been raised up that the work of supporting people in emotional crisis has historically belonged to mental health professionals. So if someone is struggling, historically, you would send them to the emergency department. Not that that's not what is happening now, that can happen. But what if we lived in a world where the work of becoming more aware about mental health issues and identifying someone who might be struggling with mental health issues, even suicide prevention, what if that work was everybody's responsibility? What if it wasn't a clinical responsibility? What if it wasn't a doctor's responsibility? What if everybody in the studio took a role in learning the signs and symptoms of somebody who might be struggling emotionally and knowing how to help? At the beginning of this event, you had us put the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, put them in our phones. So, just like if we're responding to a physical health emergency, everyone knows to call 911. Everybody knows that in your head. It's programmed in your phone. But imagine if you called a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline as a way to get help. We need to shift the responsibility of not necessarily adding more services and supports. We do need those. Don't get me wrong. But what if we added more services and supports? Concurrently, everyone else got trained to better identify people who might be struggling and what to do to support those individuals until professional help can occur. It's everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely. One big family working together. That's
Absolutely.
what it should be. Galli, thank you. Genevieve, who do you have over there?
I have Jackson here. Dr. Jet Maloney was talking about the importance of adult and human connection. And Jackson here, you were talking to me earlier about the importance of connecting at home, connecting with family, connecting with parents. Talk a little bit about that.
So I live in two houses. My parents are divorced. So my dad is still very strict, has a lot of rules, but we also have a lot of daily connection. I see him all the time. We have dinners together pretty much every night. And it's really helped me. I feel like I can go to him. But at my mom's house, I don't really see her that often. I mean, we're in the same house, we live together, I see her, obviously, but I don't interact with her as much. She'll be on her computer, I'll be on mine. We don't eat dinners together, we eat dinner on our own. So at my dad's house, I feel like it's more important. We have game nights, we have dinners together, we go do stuff as a family. It really helps bring everyone together. So I know when my dad's struggling, he knows when I'm struggling. We can help each other, we can help my sister. You know, it's kind of that working as a family instead of as individuals.
Do you see a difference in your mental health when you are getting those connections?
Yeah, so at home, it's definitely helpful to connect with people. I'd say it's more helpful at school because my peers know pretty much exactly what I'm going through because they're oftentimes going through it as well. And while my dad, has gone through a lot of it, he's from the previous generation, He doesn't have the same social media, smartphones, all of that type of distractions, influences that we have now. So peers are a lot of help as well.
Thank you, Jackson. Appreciate it. Deb, toss it over to you.
Well, speaking of peers, I want to go to Gabby now with Youthline because we just brought up the organization and what Youthline provides.
Yeah, definitely. So we were just talking about the importance of, having people around you, like family members and peers to support you. But that isn't a reality for everyone. And so for those who, maybe don't have anyone in their life who can support them or, don't feel comfortable going to their family members or their peers because suicide and mental health are really stigmatized topics. And, as a society, we still have a lot of work to do to continue to move on that conversation and to the point where everyone is, comfortable and accepting about these topics and talking about them. But Youthline is actually a really huge resource, whether or not you have people in your life to support you. We're a peer-to-peer crisis line. We're open from 4 to 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time every day. And Youthline is entirely staffed by people like me, people my age. There are some Youthline volunteers with me here today. And, like one of the specialists was talking about, it doesn't take a trained psychologist or a trained professional to support another person. It's really about that human-to-human connection.
We can all have a job and a part in this connection. It doesn't have to come just from family or your immediate friends or social group. Youthline is a perfect example for that. Gabby, thank you so much for contributing. Well, during our group sessions with high school students, we asked them what they need from parents and adults in their lives to help them connect when they need help. And here's what they have to say.
Telling your kids oh, I'm here if you need anything, even before something bad happens, because they always want to know oh, my parents here for me if I need them, and so it's not good to wait until something bad is happening to ask your kids, oh, what's going on,
I think the thing about mental illness that some people don't understand is you don't necessarily have to be in the worst spot of your life ever to be struggling with something. You can be doing totally fine and then you cannot be. It doesn't necessarily have to be started by this big traumatic event or anything. It can just kind of happen. And that doesn't register for a lot of people, and especially parents.
In some situations when children reach out to parents for help or to at least tell them that they have issues, parents can take that as oh, you're calling me a bad parent, or you're or maybe they'll see it as oh, the child is ungrateful, but they're just reaching out for help.
There should always just be an open door to speak about it. Just to know that someone's available that you can speak to when you need to, I think brings a lot of comfort to people.
I know that a lot of teens, even myself, have a hard time expressing how we feel towards our parents. So a thing that my mom and I do, we have this book that we pass back and forth. And it allows me to speak what's been on my mind or how I feel without having the fear of her judging me or having the fear of her getting upset. She'll say oh, are you feeling down? I was yeah. She's okay, go write it in the journal. So I'll write how I feel and how it happened, and I'll pass it to her. And then she'll write in it, and then she'll give it back to me, and we'll just keep going back and forth.
We have a lot of comments here in the studio, so I want to start with Parker with Youthline when we talk about resilience and what parents or adults can do for kids?
I think what really resonated with me in that conversation was there's these creative ways that you can reach out to your youth and your adolescents and your kids and adults, right? We can find really interesting ways to talk to each other. But I think the biggest challenge for parents and adults, I don't have kids, but I have all these youth learners who are like faux kids. And I think that I recognize that we have to try our best to stop problem solving. We have to try our best to start listening. Like it's really hard, right? Because we're not born with active listening skills. It's something that you have to learn over time, because there is this listening without hearing, where we are thinking about our grocery lists and we're doing this, or we're already telling ourselves that our children have messed up in some way or haven't done the right thing. And it's about stepping back, taking our own breath, because when our youth are telling us, I'm thinking about suicide or I'm struggling with my mental health, we are in crisis too. Right. We're trying to sit with them, and so it's having that empathy reaction, being able to hold the space for them to talk about what's going on for them, how they're feeling, so that not only do they feel heard and validated, but then we can get the right supports and treatments in place for them.
And people know when you're not listening, or when you're not totally
100%.
engaged or in the moment with them. Finn, go ahead and tell us what you wanted to add.
Yeah, so I wanted to just briefly touch back on this topic of social media. Now, we've been hearing a lot about the negative impacts that social media is having on our generation, and I really wanted to make sure and voice kind of a different perspective. When we're talking to our contacts on Youthline, a lot of what we'll hear from them when we ask about how they found out about us is on social media, on the internet. Dr. Robin on the panel, not famously, just mentioned.
It will be famous.
Yes, she mentioned hashtag I Can Help. I work intimately with them as well, and I can say that hashtag I Can Help is unique in the fact that not only is it an organization that sprouted up to talk about these issues in youth, but also it made its entire focus on social media and creating a positive presence on that. So I really like what Megan said about our ability to counteract these negative aspects of social media and take the possibilities and turn them into something that we can really use to share positivity and make the world a better place.
Sounds like we need to flip the conversation online. Certainly. Steve, I'll send it to you.
I agree with that. Deb Knapp, thank you. Let's talk again. Is it generational? When we talk about how parents deal with things now compared to 20, 25 years ago, where they said, hey, just deal with it. What can parents do now to kind of ease that situation for some of these kids who don't handle that very well?
Right. Well, I've heard a lot of people saying, and this is something I hear a lot from the young people that I work with, that they just really want someone to listen. And what I see parents struggling with is their propensity to try to jump in and rescue. So their child is in distress, and that's very distressing for a parent to see. And so they look at that and they go, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to take that distress away from you. And by doing that, what they do sometimes is rob that child of an ability to grow and learn, and tell them, it also sends the message, it's not okay when you make mistakes. This is something hard for you. I'm not going to listen, I'm just going to come in and rescue you, because if you make a mistake, that's going to be detrimental to you. But instead, what I hope parents learn is that mistakes are okay, and we learn and grow from them, and that's where strength and resiliency comes from. And coming in and rescuing all the time can kind of, again, rob our children of that opportunity. I use this metaphor that a butterfly needs to break its way out of its cocoon in order to fly. And if we take the cocoon away for them, then they're not going to have the strength. And so allowing those opportunities for our kids is really, really important.
Dr. Henderson, you agree? Just kind of let the mistakes happen to a certain extent for these kids?
Absolutely. And I think that holds true not only in the home, but also in school. We have heard from our young people that there's such a pressure in school to perform, to be better, to go to college, to follow this path. And to listen to some of these kids talk about, they have a 4.25 grade point average. How do you get there? Right?
I didn't.
I didn't either.
But when you get there, then the pressure becomes you have to stay there or be better. And that's the kind of thing that we've got to also look at our educators. It's test scores. It's these types of things that you have to meet. It's these metrics that you're graded on as teachers and educators, that your class has to perform better than it did last year and better than it did the year before every year. When does that stop? So at what point do we shift the conversation also where kids are at? Because think about it. Where are kids most of the time? They're in school. So who are the best first responders that we need to train? Our teachers and educators. We need to teach and support and give them the curriculum skills. We give them great curriculum to teach social studies and civics and personal finance, although I don't know if we've changed from checkbooks to debit cards. But the point being, where have we given them the curriculum around emotional well-being and mental health and how to be first responders, not only for mental health, but digital first responders in this space? That's where kids are going to learn these skills, not only in the home, but also in their school. And how can we support them with that? That's been some of the work that the Be Well Student Advisory Council has been partnering with over the last year. And that's where I think that conversation needs to go.
And Chloe, you talked earlier about mental health days off from school and being a part of the legislature, a discussion there as well. So we'll see where that goes as well. Let's go back to Genevieve now.
As you were talking, Allie was making eye contact with me. She's a teacher. I mean, you've obviously got a lot to say about this. Talk about what you've been doing in the classroom and in school to help with this.
Yeah, well, I think for a long time in education, we had this idea that we need to raise academic standards and we want kids to perform at a high level and we want them to meet their potential, and that's all true. It's all real and it's all good. But what we swung away from was that idea of educating the whole child, giving youth a chance to connect to themselves and to others, time to have reflection and space, and kind of introducing rituals and routines into our classroom that allow for them to break down some of that high stress that's building up with them. So in my classroom, we have breathing. We have time to breathe. Yes. We take time to just connect with each other. We share important news. We take moments to just do a little bit of yoga or maybe some self-reflection through journaling, that sort of thing, so that kids are getting a chance to just have a break from screens, have a break from demands, and reflect on themselves and who they are as a person in the world, and not just as an academic score or not just as what they're producing in their work. And we talked a little bit on the way here about what that looks like, and I think it looks different in every environment, in every school, but it really is, like we mentioned earlier, it really is a whole community effort to support people in their story, in their journey through life. And, as a parent too, I want my child to go to school and feel happy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big piece of it. Like, let's give them the space to do that.
Awesome work being done, Allie. Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to go back quickly to Emily Van Der Ripe. She's a mom. She knows what a lot of people here are talking about, having 2 young sons. I want to talk to you about the importance of connection in the homes. How do you really connect with your kids? 2 sons, teens.
I have 2 boys. I'm Emily. And I think that I don't know your name, but I think what you said about the butterfly is awesome, because what I'm learning, especially with my older son who has anxiety, and my younger son does too, but my older son is in treatment right now, is listening. And how do you listen as a parent? I thought I was listening well, and then after they say something, whatever I said, my son will turn back and say, I just need you to listen. And it's like, I thought I was listening. Okay. Maybe I don't know how to listen. And so like right now, my husband and I are learning how to listen, and we started with reflective listening, which is where we're kind of in tune to what our child is feeling. And instead of swooping in to solve, rescue, there's a lot of different we take on as parents, just listening and just validating. We don't have to agree with what they're saying. It's like when my son comes home from school, middle school, this teacher, blah, 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 and I just part of me wants to say, well, what was your part in it? And he's like, Mom, when you say that, it is so disvalidating. Okay, do you just want me to listen? Do you want me to, share my opinion? Do you want me to just be like, yeah, that sounds awful, or that's a hard day?
Participating in the conversation, definitely key.
Exactly.
Thank you, Emily. I appreciate that. Deb?
Well, we want to end with hope. Cody Welty's mission was born from the lowest of lows. He is a well-known suicide attempt survivor who has spoken openly, bravely about his struggles. But he says recovery from depression might not look like what you'd expect. Now he's a PhD student at the University of Arizona, studying youth suicide prevention. We caught up with him at his family's Clackamas County home.
One day I woke up and I wanted to get out of bed, and I wanted to go do something, and I wanted to be alive. It was amazing. I think I cried that morning. I was like, is this what it feels like? I forgot.
It's been a long 6 years for Cody Welty.
I forgot what it was like to be happy, and then it just kind of happened.
It's been 6 years since Cody tried to take his own life. Things were different then. Despite his happy home and good grades, Cody was depressed.
I thought that I was the only one who felt that way. And I thought that because I was a man, I couldn't express any emotions.
He talked about his high school struggles during our first youth mental health town hall last year.
It got to a point where I didn't feel like I had any options. I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone. And I tried to kill myself.
He survived, and in the years gifted to him as a second chance, he's using what he's learned in life to teach others about the importance of talking.
Going through therapy and getting through this was probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
Of resilience.
I don't know of anyone who would tell you that it's easy to do that or it doesn't take any practice, but I think that's where education is really important.
And knowing what to expect.
Recovery doesn't happen in like this nice little straight line.
So everyone who struggles has their own good morning.
That day happens and it feels really, really good.
As we mentioned, we are opening the conversation up on Facebook and on Twitter. In fact, we just received a message from Cody. Lincoln?
Yeah, I wanted to bring you this message from Cody. He's been watching our live stream on our Facebook page, and he has this message for everyone, and we want to share this. So proud of everyone there, especially the brave and well-spoken youth and my wonderful family. Thank you for hosting this event again. And speaking of family, I'm going to turn it back over to Genevieve.
I'm here with Angie Welty, Cody's mom, holding back tears right now. That was a surprise that Cody was watching. Yes. Tell me, what are you feeling right now?
I feel so much joy right now. Honestly, to look at all of you, you're like an extension of hope, and your arms out there that weren't there for us 6 years ago. Where mental health awareness has come in these last 6 years is absolutely amazing. The support systems that you guys all have in place and you're developing weren't there. And I've had the privilege of working with Gally in Clackamas County and working through a lot of things, having Cody go out, speak to teenagers, and see this wave of hope. And it feels good to sit in this chair now, and knowing that you're all taking the commitment. As parents, I'm just asking you all to just be an extension of that, and don't make assumptions because your kid comes home smiling and happy that they're not struggling. And you need to have that conversation with not just your children, with your other loved ones, anybody. The connection piece is so important because it will open the conversations for the futures for anything that does happen. And I think we just keep going on this track, and we just keep, I don't know, just bust it open and just keep talking. So, thanks, Cody.
And I've talked with a lot of parents who are struggling, who are probably in a similar situation to where you were 6 years ago. What advice would you give them now?
I would say educate yourself and get better tools. When we talk about the generational changes, how we were raised is not how we need to work with raising you. We need to be better educated. We need to know better tools. We need to have better ways of listening, learning what it is that you all need, not what we need or what worked for us, because that's not where you are today. We need to get better educated. And this type of town hall helps parents. And a parent like myself may have changed the channel because I thought my kids were doing okay. I would have told you Cody was great. He didn't present any of the symptoms or signs that you typically see. And so I would say, you can't sit on this, you have to be. It doesn't matter who you are. It touches every walk of life. We all need that skill set. As much as you need CPR for the person who collapsed, you need mental health CPR to work on every aspect of your life in that area. So that's what I would say.
Angie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. It was just incredible. Great to hear from Cody. Yes. We'll toss it back to you, Steve and Deb.
What an incredible family. Played such a big role moving this conversation forward. And you guys too. Thank you for coming, all of you. Kids, experts, parents, thank you. So you see, there is hope, certainly is, and there's healing out there as well when we all work together to help our youth manage their way through 21st century pressures. We've been scrolling these numbers to the bottom of the screen, but here's a better look at them. We provided them to all the kids in the audience before the show started, and we have them in other resources at KATU.com.
Critical information there. Let's keep the conversations going. These young people are depending on all of us. Thank you so much for watching our Kind is Better Youth Mental Health Town Hall.